6. Now, for example 3, you're going to find in your sequences and series, because we have a number of formulas, that you're going to often go right away to a formula to try and solve a question. Example 3, maybe you want to put an asterisk beside it because it is one where your first thing that you need to do is not with a formula. It's going to be using the same kind of strategy that you used at the beginning when we were doing the license plates, because in this one we don't know what term 1 is and we don't know what the common difference is. So we can't make a formula if there's those two things we don't know. So what we're going to do is we're going to set this one up very similar to the idea that we set up with those license plates. I'm going to draw a diagram. I don't know term 1. I'm going to put a space there. I don't know term 2. I don't know term 3. Term 4 right here is minus 4. Then I don't know term 5, term 6, but term 7 is 23. And just like the strategy that you saw with the license plates, it tells us that this is an arithmetic sequence, so we know that we're going to add d 3 times to go from -4 to 23. We're going to add d once, then we're going to add d again to get to this term 6, then we're going to add d again to get to 23. What we can do is we can take this picture that we just wrote and make an equation. Because basically what we're saying is if you start with -4 and you add d 3 times, what are you going to get? If I start with -4 and I add d 3 times, I'm going to get 23. Now that's not a formula on our formula sheet. It's an idea. And it's an idea based on the fact that to go from term 4 to term 7, we're going to have to add whatever our common difference is 3 times. So if I start with -4 and add 3 common differences, I'm going to get to 23. But by writing that equation, I now have an equation that the only thing I don't know is d, and we can use our algebraic skills to figure out what that is. Now, I could add 4 to both sides. So I get 3d is equal to 27. Divide both sides by 3. And get d is equal to 9. When we came up with our strategies for a license plate, we noticed that there was a difference of 24 between the 11 and the 35. And then we divided that by 3 because there was 3 times that we added that. This is the same idea. The difference between -4 and 23 is 27. And we've added d 3 times, so then we can figure out that d is 9. Once we have d is equal to 9, there's 2 ways we can go about finding what term 1 is. One way is just using the pattern. What would I have to do if I went backwards? If I was adding 9, I'd have to subtract 9. So that would get me to -13, then -22, and finally -31. So I could find term 1 by just subtracting 9 once I figure out that my common difference is 9. And then I could say that I know that term 1 is equal to -31. Not a bad strategy in this example because you only had to do it 3 times. But if the question started with term 405 and went to 412, then it's not necessarily a good strategy to keep subtracting d that many times. Maybe you could say, well, to go down from 4 to 1, I'd have to subtract d 3 times, so that might be quicker. You can also use your formula. So now that you've figured out what d is, what do we know? We know that our formula looks like, oops, plus Tn is equal to T1 plus Dn minus 1. So if we're looking at our formula, what do we know? Well, we know that D is 9. So I'm going to put that in first. What do we want to find? I want to find term 1. That's something I didn't know yet. Even though we figured it out, let's pretend we don't know it's minus 31 yet. Well, if I want to find term 1, I need to put in numbers for everything else in this. Otherwise, I won't have enough information to solve for my equation. So I need to put something in for n, and I need to put something in for Tn. Now, if we look at what we had in the question, can you see that they told us term 4 and they told us term 7? So you can choose either to use term 4 or term 7, and it won't matter. It'll give you the same answer for term 1, whichever one that you use. So if you decide that I want to use term 7 because it's a positive number and I make more mistakes with negative numbers, then what you would do is you would put in 23 because that's term 7, and then for n, since we're using term 7, put in 7 minus 1. If you use term 4, you would plug in minus 4 for term 4, and then a 4 for the n. Now, if we do the algebra here, we're going to get 23 is equal to term 1 plus 9 times 6, which is 54. Subtract 54 on both sides. And you get negative 31, the same answer that we had from before. So these questions, this example right here, example 3, is a tougher one because if you try to go to using your formulas right away, you'll find out that you don't know term 1 and you don't know D. So maybe you want to put that as a note at the top so that you can sort of, how do I recognize this kind of question when it comes up? So anytime you have a question where you don't know term 1 and you don't know D, and they'll always appear because they'll tell you 2 other terms, then you're going to have to first look for this pattern. How many times am I going to add D to go from one to the next? And then figure out what D is. And then you can go to your formula, or you continue to use the pattern to find out what term 1 is. Sometimes these questions say term 4 is minus 4, term 7 is 23. What is term 150? So you would have to find the D value first. Then you'd have to find term 1 so you could actually get the formula that has term 1 and D to figure out another value. So the questions you can do that deal with this one are number 10 and number 13.